Coming up for 25 minutes to 11 o'clock, you're listening to the Morning Review. My name is Lester Kevitt, and you can call in and let us know at any time what you think, not necessarily about the conversations that we are covering right now, but if anything pops into your head, anything that you see, anything that you want to react to, something that you saw, read or heard elsewhere, give us a call, 021-446-0567. There's a lot happening in the world at the moment. Now, this weekend saw an end to the Euro 2020 competition. It has now come and gone. Italy, of course, winning on Sunday night. A tournament that has gone largely off without a hitch. Usually European football tournaments are marred when it comes to the sites of hooliganism, riots, and in many cases racism. At this time, also included, and I guess but different, but also including the sentiments of online racism. From the beginning of the tournament, there were threats of boycotts and booing if teams took the knee or unfurled anti-discrimination banners. And then on Sunday, very, very ugly scenes. After that final whistle, the bile that was spewed out by particularly English fans on their own players. A lot of black players coming in for quite a lot of abuse on social media, to such an extent it being debated in the Parliament of the United Kingdom. Rafal Pankowski is also heads up an organization called Never Again. It's a anti-racism organization that particularly uses sport and football to try and stamp out racism in that country. I want to bring in Rafal first into this conversation. Rafal, nice talking to you again here on the Morning Review. How are you doing?
Hello. Thank you for having me.
A really good tournament in terms of the football side of things, but from what we've seen on the sidelines, whether it be booing, whether it be racism, whether it be some of the abuse that players have taken for taking the knee, or whether it be in terms of the booing when anti-discrimination banners are unfurled out, LGBTQI plus flags being rolled out at some of the stadiums, not being well received by many parts of fans and football communities, particularly in the eastern part of the continent where you are.
Well, I agree with you. I think it's been a very interesting tournament for many different reasons, also including the discussions around discrimination and anti-discrimination. Both racism and homophobia have been very much, present as topics during the tournament. And I think you are right to note that there is a certain political cultural divide in Europe today. So even if we look at the teams who took the knee in support of Black Lives Matter, these were teams such as England and other Western European teams, also the teams that supported the LGBT rights campaign, but the teams from the former Eastern Bloc did not join in. Teams from countries such as Poland, my country, or Hungary, or Russia. So ironically, the countries that in many cases used to be quite progressive when it comes to supporting the anti-apartheid struggle, decades ago, today, they seem to be on the wrong side of history. They often seem to be, influenced by reactionary politics, including xenophobia and intolerance.
And reactionary politics can infiltrate everything from sport to culture, but also to beer. You're saying that there's a Polish brewery that's owned by a right-wing politician who's sparked an outrage for a beer that essentially mocks the death of George Floyd in the US.
Yeah, that is really nasty as a stunt. I think, of course, it is one of the examples of what we have just talked about, the rise of the far right in Central and Eastern Europe. But it's a particularly outrageous case. So, the politician in question who owns the brewery is one of the leaders of Confederation, which is a far right party in Poland, which actually draws upon the symbolism of the Confederacy in the U.S. South in the 19th century. So it consciously uses racist tropes, and in this case we are talking about a new beer brand which this brewery produced under the name White IPA Matter, which is a kind of tasteless joke, in my opinion, and also it alludes to White Lives Matter as a slogan which is employed by the far right in response to the Black Lives Matter movement. So what we are talking about here is the kind of backlash against Black Lives Matter, which is a global movement, which of course shook the conscience of many people across the world in the last year or two. But there is also a global backlash against it, which comes from the racist forces and the forces of the far right, and this is one example of that, which is really nasty and unfortunate.
Rafal, I want to bring into the conversation Elliot Ray. He's a writer on football, music, as well as culture and fatherhood, but he joins now. Elliot, nice speaking to you again. You also have been covering some of the post Euro 2020 final, some of the backlash, particularly being targeted at black players, Marcus Rashford, Jordan Sancho, Bukayo Saka, young men who have had to endure quite a lot of online abuse, so much so it ends up being debates in the UK Parliament. How are you doing?
Hey, Lester. I'm well. I could be better, but I'm okay. Thank you. Good to speak to you again.
Tell us about what has been the experience like, particularly for these black players in the United Kingdom after that final on Sunday night.
So it's been a strange time here. I'm in London, in the UK. It's been a strange time. The last month has actually been really good. There was at the beginning of the tournament, a lot of the players were taking the knee. The team were taking the knee, and some fans were booing the players. This is before the tournament. It's in the friendlies, and some of our politicians came out and said, "Well, the fans have a right to boo if they see fit." So it started off quite sour, and there was a bit of divide, or there was divide before the tournament started. But once the tournament started and, we saw the togetherness of the team, Gareth Southgate as the manager was doing so good. The team were winning, they were playing so well, it was a good vibe. It was, and I think what it did is it brought the country together. And I would walk down the road and I would see black and Asian people and white people all wearing England tops and celebrating together. And there was a real togetherness. And on Sunday midday, that carried on. And it is so sad that all it took was a couple of missed penalties for it seemingly just to go back 10 steps. So we went from feeling all quite together to now having this massive divide where we've seen some disgusting racial abuse targeted to those three players. And we've seen our politicians come out and try to vilify the racists when they were actually supporting that very thing a month ago. But what I guess on the flip side is that we've had a really good backlash to the racists. Loads of people have been very vocal in supporting anti-racist messages, in supporting those three players, and really making their stand, which is good. And I think the positivity has drowned out the negativity. But I think for a lot of us, it's just kind of like, here we go again. And it's been a tough week for a lot of people.
You've been listening into my conversation with Rafal, who's still on the line with us, and he spoke about this difference, this schism that is seemingly growing between Western Europe, Eastern Europe, particularly with right-wing voices becoming more entrenched in politics, in culture, but also in sport. Do you see that? But at the same time, it doesn't take much. It takes losing a Euro championship and 3 missed penalties for that equal level of virulent racism to come up even in Western Europe and not just in Eastern Europe, in Poland, in Hungary, where Rafal is at the moment.
Yeah, I think there's been a real change in the last few years in England. Pretty much since Brexit, to be honest. Before Brexit, the vibe was different. I think there was a lot more unity. Not saying there wasn't racism, of course there was, but it wasn't so overt. It was more hidden. Racists were operating in silos, I guess. Whereas I think what Brexit has done is given a voice to people who think that way. It's given a voice to racists. It's made them a collective. And people feel safe being racist now because they know other people think like them and will be vocal about it. So since 2016 and that Brexit vote, we've seen the rise of that far right. And, the government we have here, Conservatives, we know some of the politicians' personal histories, and they overwhelmingly won a majority in the last election, and that is, of course, some people who are far right and racist, but that's also some of Middle England who just kind of go with the flow, really, unfortunately. And we're seeing that now, and there is a big divide. There is people on one side who are very, very vocal about being anti-racist, and they're doing lots of stuff and lots of work to try and move forward and combat racism. But at the same time, you've got the other voices as well who have been getting louder. And it is sad. I think my overwhelming feeling this week has just been sadness, really. I'm not even angry because I'm out of anger. I haven't got any energy to be angry. This is nothing new. This is not surprising. This is not shocking. It's just sadness that we're kind of back here again. And, for a little while, I think we felt like we'd taken a step. It felt like that a little bit. And I think from Sunday and Monday, it's just the reality that actually underneath all of that, as soon as a black player misses a penalty, we're back at square one, basically.
Rafal, a message here saying, it's just football. Why are you making a deal out of football? Is it ever just football? Is it ever just beer? Or is it more than that?
Well, that's an interesting question. I think what we just heard is of course very very important in the sense that football reflects society and culture, but it also influences society and culture. And my impression is overall the England team, in the last weeks, have made a very positive contribution to social inclusion, and not just in the UK. I think, as role models, the footballers have a big impact, and it can be a very positive impact. So, on the one hand, football can be utilized to promote division and hatred, and we have seen it in history many times. But it can also play a positive role in society. It can unite people above differences of race or creed, etc. And I think the example of England this year is basically a positive one, and it goes beyond just British society, of course.
Elliot, South Africa has its very own deep problems, but when we look at our sport, it is used as a manner of unifying. We look at the 1995 World Cup. We look at the 2020 Football World Cup. We look at the 2019 World Cup, where a group of, what was the squad of about 32 men coming together with their own background stories, diverse backgrounds, essentially being used as a tool for social cohesion. And I wonder, is the same being done in the UK with a league made up of so many different players, whether it be from East Asia, Africa, the Middle East, Latin America? It's probably the most diverse league in the world, being represented by so many countries. I wonder if the national team and which reflects the diversity of the New Britain at the moment, whether that is effectively being used as a tool for social cohesion.
I want to say it's being used. I think it just naturally is. You know, when you're looking at the England team, you're seeing Raheem Sterling, grew up near me in Wembley. You're seeing Kyle Walker, Bukayo Saka. You know, just you can see his name. You know, that's not an English name, right? So we can see the England team is diverse, even to back in one of the best times, the 2012 Olympics, when we had Mo Farah. You know, we had Jessica Ennis. Amazing. That was an amazing time. And I think sport has the ability to do that. It has the ability to bring people together. It has to be natural. It has to be authentic. But it can be done in the right way. And I have to give credit to Gareth Southgate, the England manager, because he did a great job of doing that. You know, and he released a statement at the beginning of the tournament talking about the anti-racist stance and why the players have taken the knee. And I think sport, when it's done well and when it's going well, can have an amazing impact, because we all feel sport very deeply. It's an emotional connection. It's more than just football. It's a deep emotional connection we have with the game. But I think, that being said, it's not necessarily, you know, the sport can't dictate the behaviour of every fan. And when we're seeing these fans being racist on social media and in person, we've had examples of people being racist in person as a result of Sunday. You know, sport, that's not a sport problem. That's just a societal problem. That is things that go a lot deeper than football. This is history. This is attitudes. This is politics. You know, and I think what we need sport to do is, and football to do especially, is to clamp down on the racism like they really could do if they really cared. So we saw the Super League earlier this year. That was an idea that came in. You know, football was going to be ripped apart, and they were going to take all the top teams and play across the world. And that got stamped out in about 48 hours because the powers that be came together, UEFA, the FA, etc., Premier League came together and stamped that out. And if they wanted to do the same for racism, they could do. You know, that means fining clubs. That means banning players for life. That means stopping games if there's booing and racist abuse going on. You know, if they really, really wanted to, they can. And I think that is where the challenge is now. It's got to the point where we have to challenge these authorities to do better, to really control what they can control within their environments, because they're not doing enough as it is.
Let's listen to a quick voice note, 0725671567.
Regarding the racism debate, I think the biggest change we've seen in the last 10 years is the advent of social media. Now, just imagine what would have happened regarding the guy speaking on the radio now with regards to UK, feeling of togetherness, people of every race, culture, wearing England shirts out there, showing their support. None of that happening online. I mean, it's also happening online, but it's definitely happening in the streets as well. And the feeling of togetherness. Now, imagine social media didn't exist. What would happen after Sunday night? People wouldn't go out in the streets and wear racism T-shirts, for example. All the racism that you see, starts or happens, or people feel free to do it online in social media. But if you raise a social media, then these people, you take away their megaphone. That now the racists have to sit in their home and grumble at their family and do nothing, and you never see it, and that stops it from spreading, in my opinion. So, to me, it's the problem is exacerbated chronically by social media, and there isn't a flip side. It's not like the love also spreads via social media, because in my opinion, from what I've seen, it doesn't.
It's tougher for the love to spread in real person because people actually need to go out there. But Rafal, this is something that you've dealt with the Never Again organization, countering racism, bigotry, prejudice, not only how it manifests on football fields, but also online, dark web forums, chat groups, and this is also a place to counter those messages.
Yes, well, absolutely. one of our projects is called Get the Trolls Out, which is an international project of cooperation against discrimination and hatred online. And yes, I agree that racism and intolerance nowadays is expressed not exclusively but largely on social media. And of course, one of the very important aspects of that is the responsibility of the companies behind it, because these are not charities. They make profit on the platforms, and that unfortunately includes directly or indirectly profit made from those racist expressions, which I think is of course beyond acceptable. And at some point, those companies really need to take responsibility and act in a way that acknowledges the importance of the issue and the danger that is very clear.
Rafal and Elliot, you do absolutely important work. Elliot, your work is online. You've recently held a webinar particularly discussing football, England, culture, divides that have to be healed. Just where can people learn a bit more about MFF?
Yeah, so people can go to musicfootballfatherhood.com. We've got a book called Dad, which has 20 stories from different fathers, so definitely check that out. We do webinars. We have a podcast as well. And as you said, Lester, on Monday we have an event around anti-racist parenting and how we rewrite these narratives for ourselves. I think it's really important when these things happen that we can create our own narratives for ourselves and our families and our children. And our event on Monday was all about how we can kind of practically do that and what that means in terms of how we create community around our children. So definitely check us out, musicfootballfatherhood.com. All the information is on there.
Rafal, you also do very important work there in Warsaw, Poland, where you are. How can people find out more about the Never Again Association?
Well, everybody's invited to check out our Facebook page on social media, which is titled Respect Diversity. And also our website, of course, neveragain.org.
Rafal Pankowski, head of the Never Again organization in Poland. Elliot Ray, based in London, England, is a writer, parenting and mental health positivity trainer, also writes a lot about football.